Hi, this is Vicky Payne, veterinary consultant for Oscars and Breakthrough, and today I'm talking about preparing our dogs for autumn and winter and some of the problems and hazards that can throw up for our dogs. The first and most obvious thing is that the days are going to get shorter, and this will often lead to a change in routine for our dogs. It might mean that we're walking them in the dark in the mornings before we go to work. It might mean that their second walk of the day, if they get a second walk, is earlier rather than later on. Certainly during the summer, my dogs might not be getting a walk till 7 or 8 o'clock when it cools down, but I'm going to try and avoid that once it gets dark in the winter. So you might need to think about things like toileting for younger and older dogs, managing that. And morning walks are normally okay. We're normally still trying to get them out before we go to work or take the kids to school. But if we're doing an earlier afternoon walk and we're not changing our feeding time at all, then we've got to make sure that our dogs have got an opportunity to do pees and poos before bedtime to avoid the risk of having accidents inside. And as I say, that's especially important if we've got a younger dog or an older dog. I don't think anybody's suggested that dogs can suffer properly from the seasonally affected disorder in the way that people can, but certainly they're affected by their routine changing. If they've been used to getting lovely, long, exciting walks during the summer, and then it starts raining, it gets cold, all the tracks in the woods become muddy and unpleasant to use, then it might be that we start doing more boring walks, more pavement walks, and shorter walks with them, and that can definitely affect how your dog feels about life. What can we do about this? Well, you may just have to get yourself some good waterproofs and some boots, and certainly I have Springer Spaniels and they're not going to let me get away with just doing boring pavement walks all winter, so it's a case of getting kit on for that. But if you have other breeds of dog, they might not be as enthusiastic about wet, muddy walks. So we've got to think about things that we can do inside. I really love scent work games for dogs. I'll use scent work games with a lot of my problem behaviour dogs. It's just something dogs love. Dogs are essentially a nose with an animal attached. So they generally, all breeds will love to work with their noses to find food or to find toys. There's loads of great resources online on how to teach scent work. But the lovely thing about scent work is it's very mentally tiring, but it's not very physically difficult. So it's suitable for all ages of dogs, from puppies right up to oldies. And you can play it inside. So you can hide your objects around the house and then you can ask your dog to go and find those. If you teach it with what we call indication, where the dog sits and stares at the object that it's found, then they're not going to tear your house apart, which is a pretty good thing. You can actually also take scent work out on walks. You can hide your scented articles, perhaps going out on the walk, and then you can search your dog on the way back. So if you can, I'm always on the lookout for walls with holes in, maybe a dry stone wall, maybe a brick wall with some gaps in it for drainage, and they're brilliant places to hide things for your dog. Also, if you're lucky enough to have an outbuilding or a garage, something like that, that can be another great place to play some scent work games with your dog. Other things that you can think about doing would include getting your dog to do some work for their food. So it can be as simple as scattering the food in a room, snuffle mats which you can hide your little kibbles in and then the dog's got to snuffle around to find. There are slow feeding bowls that are like mazes, licky mats, toys like Kongs that you can stuff. And there's quite a few enrichment toys, if you have a look on the Oscars website, that are designed to be stuffed with food or used with food. And that adds an extra element to the day. Dogs seem to enjoy working for their food more than just being fed it in a bowl. And it can add an extra bit of entertainment to their day if their walks are slightly more boring because of bad weather. You can also think about doing some extra training with your dog. So a question that comes up for me a lot is, how can I stop my spaniel pulling on the lead? And the answer, I'm afraid, is just training. Well, bad weather in the winter is an excellent time to do some training because you can do a lot of your basic heel work and loose lead training in even a really small house. I don't have a big house and I can do heel work around a chair in my living room or around my little kitchen table. So going back to some basics can be really useful, even with an older dog. Or you might need to decide to teach something more fun. So again, trick training is a brilliant way to give your dog mental exercise. The tricks can be useful, so they can be things like go to bed, find my shoes, find my keys, or they can be cute. It can be, the classic shoot the dog, die and roll over. That has a lot of different parts to it and takes quite a long time to train. But yeah, you can train practical things, you can train party pieces, but all of these will help with your dog's mental well-being once the weather gets bad, the days get short, and you're struggling to provide enough exercise and entertainment for them. I'm going to confess that I actually love the approach of autumn. For me, with my busy dogs, the cooler weather, the better scenting conditions, it's what I live for. I love the autumn, but not everybody feels the same. Something that I definitely look forward to is getting that extra hour of sleep when the clocks go back in at the end of October. My dogs are pretty good. They're used to me getting up at different times, either slightly earlier or slightly later, and they don't get too fussed about going out for their walk or getting their breakfast. But not all dogs are as good as mine. If your dog is very used to getting fed and walked at the same time every morning, don't expect to lie in when the clocks change. If they're used to 7 o'clock, I'm afraid, even though the clock says 6 o'clock, you'll need to get up at 6 and sort them out. They will get into a new routine over the space of a couple of weeks. So if your dog is very, very living by the clock like that, you know, the first day it's going to be 6 o'clock, then it might be 10 past 6, 20 past 6, like that. Especially if you're thinking about puppies, they're not going to be able to hold their bladder for an extra hour, so make sure that you're up at the usual, what would be their usual time, and then again gradually change that routine rather than expecting them to change too quickly. The autumn and winter brings some extra hazards for dogs. Obviously we don't have to worry about heat stroke anymore, but we do have to worry about some different things as we come into autumn and winter. For my older dogs, I'm quite often worried about slips and falls. If we've got ice or snow, be really careful with those old dogs that they're not slipping and causing injuries. I also find that some of my arthritis patients will struggle as the cold, wet weather comes in. So think about using coats to keep them dry. Think about using drying rugs to dry them off when they get home. So they can still enjoy their walks, but they're not going to have any negative effects afterwards. Try to avoid your dog drinking from puddles at any time of year, but especially in the winter. We do still see cases of dogs getting poisoned with antifreeze. It's not the sort of antifreeze that you spray on your car windscreen, it's the stuff that goes into the engine, and it contains a chemical called ethylene glycol. Depending what source you look at, this is either sweet tasting or dogs and cats can't taste it, but they certainly will drink it out of puddles. It doesn't taste disgusting to them. And even if it's been treated with a substance like Bitrex to make it unpleasant, dogs and cats do see those flavours slightly differently to people, so it might stop kiddies drinking it, but it's not necessarily going to stop your dog or cat drinking it. So if you're using these products yourself, if you're topping up antifreeze in your engine, be really careful how you store those and dispose of them, but also, you know, be careful of puddles on people's driveways, around people's driveways, especially at this time of year. Unfortunately, by the time you see the symptoms of antifreeze poisoning, it's usually too late for the vet to do anything about it. Other hazards at this time of year would include road salt. This doesn't in the UK tend to contain any antifreeze, but obviously just licking the salt can be irritating to the paws, and also licking it can lead to your dog taking in a large amount of salt, and that can be problematic. They then drink a lot of water, it causes cell damage, and they can become quite ill from that. Another significant risk as the days get shorter is your own safety and your dog's safety while out for a walk. I always go out, I quite often do this in the summer as well, but I would always go out in the autumn and winter wearing a high-vis vest with some reflective bits on it. You can get reflective collars and leads for on your dog, flashing collars, really nice flashing collars so that you can be seen. I often go out with a head torch or a body-worn running torch as well, because I'm having to go out quite early when it's still very dark. May help to you can get reflective rugs for dogs as well, just anything that makes you more visible. It's quite surprising how difficult it can be to see people and dogs when you're driving in the winter, even if you're driving slowly. I think even if you're mostly walking on pavements, this is not a bad idea to make sure that nobody can say they didn't see you. It can be quite disturbing for our dogs, so making ourselves more visible can be really helpful, because it can be quite disturbing for our dogs if suddenly out of nowhere a car appears or a loud noise appears. They are able to see and hear things better than us, but even so, if it's darker and then something suddenly jumps out on them, that can be quite nerve-wracking for our dogs. So anything that makes us more visible, anything that makes motorists and other people more likely to notice us and take some action is a really good idea. It's useful to get your dogs used to these things. Some dogs might be a bit alarmed if they've never seen a torch before. Some breeds can suffer from problems like shadow chasing, so we need to be a little bit careful that we don't have any of those before we take them out on walks with our torch and high-vis. Some dogs may have a negative reaction to high-vis clothing. They might have been frightened by workmen or something like that. Might have the opposite reaction to people in high-vis, and they super love it, because my bin men feed my dogs biscuits when they're small and give them a hug every time we see them. So if your dog isn't used to high-vis, isn't used to people in high-vis, get them used to that at home, wear it around the house. You'll feel a bit of a nerd, but build those good associations so that your dog isn't frightened when you put on some bright clothing. Other things that we can see round about as we come into the winter, as we get towards the end of October, maybe people will have Halloween decorations out. So again, I don't think you can necessarily prepare your dog this, but be prepared that suddenly, if people have got these skeletons outside their houses that sort of jump and go boo, it's designed to scare us. It could certainly scare our dogs as well. Be prepared. Have something to help your dog bounce back from anything scary that might happen on an early morning or late evening walk. Have some treats, have a toy. If they do have a startle reaction like that, that is completely normal, and it's sort of what the person that put the Halloween decoration out wanted. But don't make a big deal of it. Be like, sort of, oh, that was silly, wasn't it? Oh, good boy, you know, I'm going to go and touch it, see it's actually okay, and then be prepared for it next time. There are one of my dogs desperately waits for winter to come and near Christmas to come because a neighbour puts out some dancing Christmas snowmen ornaments, and she loves to go and trigger the dancing Christmas snowmen. So yeah, you know, you can make these things fun. The first time she was startled, then she was like, oh my god, these things move, they sing, they're brilliant. And so yeah, now we have to go and look for them at Christmas time. Halloween also gives us the potential problem of people coming to our front door, and in another blog I've talked about dogs that bark excessively and bark at doors, and this is definitely something that can be a problem if you've got children trick-or-treating. You can do it the lazy behaviourist way and just put a sign up at the bottom of your drive saying please don't knock on the door. This tends to be my approach, and I put out a big cauldron full of sweeties for the children. I dress up the front of the house. I don't actually have to answer the door to them, so that means that my dogs aren't barking, and it also means that there's no risk of me opening the door and either my dog frightening the children or running out onto the road and being injured. So something to think about there is how you manage Halloween. Some people love to take photos at Halloween with their pets dressed up. That can be fine for some dogs, it can be not fine for other dogs. I think I'm not anti-dressing dogs up. My dogs are used to wearing rugs and drying rugs and things like that, and they would have no idea whether I'd dressed them up in a normal fleece rug or whether I'd dressed them up in one that looked like a pumpkin or had some bats on it. Make sure your dog's okay with it, make sure they're happy to be part of the fun. Hot on the heels of Halloween comes bonfire night. I'm in Sussex, we have bonfires from September onwards, so we need to start about thinking how to manage our dogs for this quite early on. The rest of the country tends to only do their bonfires around the 5th of November, so the weeks either side of that date. But we can get fireworks again for some other celebrations, Diwali, Christmas, New Year. There are also times when we might get fireworks. This particular vlog isn't going to go into depth about fireworks, but start thinking about fireworks as soon as possible if your dog doesn't like them. Ideally start thinking in February about fireworks and look at putting in a desensitisation and counter conditioning program there to help your dog with noise sensitivities. Otherwise, go and consult your vet now about medications and supplements that can be used to help your dog through this fireworks season. We have got several blogs and vlogs on fireworks and dealing with noise sensitivity if you want some specific help with those, and obviously vets and behaviourists will work with you on those as well. If you decide to work on a desensitisation plan for your dog, then that is an ideal time to look at using Breakthrough Startup, which can help with the balance of neurochemicals in the brain, allow your dog to be a little bit calmer in their background state, and also open them up to learning new things like fireworks are not the end of the world. Okay, I think that's enough worrying about winter. As I'm recording this, the sun is still out, and hopefully we'll have a nice long Indian summer well into the end of September and the beginning of October. But do start thinking about the changes that are going to affect your dog as the weather changes. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook. We've also got Instagram, LinkedIn and TikTok. And yeah, happy autumn, happy winter.